In 2011, the vault manager at the Key Bank branch of Anchorage, Alaska, robbed the bank of $4.3 million. His name was Gerardo Adan Cazares Valenzuela, and he had planned everything. The heist, the timing, the escape, and how he would cover his tracks. He had it all figured out. But guess what? Even the best plans can go sideways. When you're robbing someone, and especially one of the US's largest banks, you need the perfect plan. And even a teensy-weensy goof-up can wreck the whole show. And Valenzuela, he made a tiny, almost laughable mistake. Let's find out what mistake he made in his otherwise perfect heist. The planning. Valenzuela was working as a vault manager at Key Bank, right? But it turned out his job was stable no more, and he was sitting on a ticking time bomb. The bank was making some personnel changes, and Valenzuela felt like his job was in danger. With the threat of unemployment breathing down his neck, he started thinking, why not hit the jackpot before they show me the door? Now, robbing a bank is not something you decide over breakfast. But Valenzuela was not your average Joe. He had access to a vault brimming with millions, and luckily, not a soul was physically guarding it. Just some cameras. In Valenzuela's mind, it was as if the universe were nudging him to take some money and run away. When he got this wild idea to rob the bank, the first person he called was his girlfriend. But when she didn't freak out, she was on board with the plan. She would have thought that maybe he could really pull it off, and then they would live a luxurious life together. After that, Valenzuela started the planning. He knew the ins and outs of the bank. Of course, he was the manager, right? But the real ace up his sleeve was something else. It was the lack of direct oversight on the vault. There was no security guard, no other banker around there. He could just waltz in and out, and no one would see him or suspect him. No accomplices needed, no messy confrontations, clean and simple. This was the first part of his luck. As we already know, Key Bank was looking for some personnel changes, so they hired some new employees. Training them was part of Valenzuela's job, and it turned out to be the second stroke of luck. You see, there's this rule in banking. There's a dual control on every vault. It means you need two people to open the vault. But while showing the new employees the ropes, Valenzuela forgot to mention this little detail. Convenient, right? Now the new employees wouldn't suspect anything, even if he opened the vault alone. Weeks rolled by, and Valenzuela's plan was shaping up nicely. No physical guards, no dual control. It was almost too good to be true. He started seeing himself as the mastermind of the perfect heist, one that would set him up for life and get back at the bank for almost kicking him out. It was more than a heist for Valenzuela. It was his shot at securing his future. So he plotted everything with precision. The heist. In July 2011, Valenzuela decided to do a trial run before the main heist. To make sure he got everything right. So instead of taking millions, he quietly stole $30,000 from the vault at Key Bank. It was a breeze for him. Not a soul suspected a thing. Now, flushed with cash, Valenzuela didn't just sit on it. He spent 24 grand from the pile to buy a private jet. This would take him from Anchorage to Seattle after the big heist. Why Seattle? Well, that's where his girlfriend was waiting. He had already flown her a couple of days earlier. It was all part of the grand escape plan. Now, let's talk about the D-Day. July 29th, a Friday. Valenzuela had his eyes on a much bigger prize this time. $4.3 million. He needed the bank to himself. Of course, pulling out a heist needs time. So he cooked up a story. He told the bank's manager that he needed to stay late for an ice cream social for the customers. The branch manager bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and left Valenzuela alone in the bank. He was even happy that Valenzuela was putting in extra hours to improve the bank's image in the eyes of its customers. Now, with the coast clear, Valenzuela made his first move. He strolled into the vault, grabbed $4.3 million, and put them into 3 separate computer boxes. Now, he didn't want to lose any more time, so he loaded the boxes onto a rolling cart and wheeled them out to his car. The next stop was the private airport, where his jet to Seattle was waiting. Valenzuela had also prepared for any trouble. He'd armed himself with an AK-47 for protection. After reaching Seattle, he picked up a Ford Fusion, and with his girlfriend by his side, headed off to California. You're probably thinking, that's it? Just grab the cash and jet off? Not so fast. Valenzuela was not about to leave loose ends. Imagine what if the manager and the team walked in the next day, found the vault missing a few million, and sent the cops on Valenzuela's tail in a heartbeat. If that happened, he wouldn't even have made it to his girlfriend in Seattle. But Valenzuela, he was one step ahead. Before leaving the bank, he did something clever. He set the vault's timer to lock for 6 days. Yep, he made sure it was the maximum time possible. By doing this, he didn't just delay the discovery of the missing cash, he made sure no one even suspected the cash was missing until he was long gone. That's the kind of detail that separates a successful heist from a quick bust. Valenzuela also mailed his and his girlfriend's phones to New York. It was his classic misdirection play to throw off anyone trying to track them after the heist. And then came the 6th day after the heist. The bank finally opened the vault, and they were in for a shock. Millions were missing. But by then, Valenzuela had already crossed state lines. He was in Mexico and well on his way to a new life. A costly detour. Everything was going smoothly up to this point. Valenzuela and his girlfriend were driving in Mexico. Valenzuela wanted to meet his uncle, who lived in Sonora, before going fully MIA with his girlfriend. The two of them were thinking that they got away with it, and now that they were out of the USA's grasp, they could do anything. But not so fast. His uncle suggested they ditch the car and take a bus instead to visit him. He was probably thinking he was doing Valenzuela a favor, right? But no. We'll reveal later why that's the case. But why did he suggest they ditch the car in the first place? Well, he believed that those rough Mexican roads were not exactly friendly to cars, especially when you're trying to keep a low profile. So he suggested that they change their way of transportation. So Valenzuela and his girlfriend took the advice. They drove all the way to Tijuana, which is a journey in itself. When they reached there, they abandoned the car. And right there was the teeny tiny mistake he made that flawed his otherwise perfect plan. August 2nd, 2011 started like any other day for Valenzuela, except he was on a bus with millions in his bag, heading to what he thought was freedom. But life, as Valenzuela was about to find out, can throw some serious twist. As the bus rolled along, it suddenly got pulled over at a Mexican checkpoint. You know the drill, everyone has to get off with luggage in hand for a routine check. Now, Valenzuela, he was sitting on a mountain of cash, and there's no doubt that he must have felt his heart sink. It's one of those moments where everything goes in slow motion. The passengers lined up, opened their bags, and the officers started their search. They got to Valenzuela's bag and bam, they hit the jackpot. But not in a good way for our heist mastermind. The police found a whopping 3.8 million US dollars. But hang on, wasn't it 4.3 mil that Valenzuela took? Where was the rest? Well, we'll circle back to that in a bit. At that moment, Valenzuela's plans crumbled. His life flashed before his eyes. He was arrested right there and then, on the spot, for money laundering, illegal arms possession, and smuggling. These charges in Mexico are the kind that get you to a long prison sentence. And for Valenzuela, that's exactly what happened. 7 years behind bars. Lucky for his girlfriend, she wasn't charged with anything, not even for the fact that she was accompanying a robber and knew about the plan the whole time. Due to that one tiny mistake, due to that change of vehicle, Valenzuela had to spend 7 years in Mexican prison. And as Valenzuela explained it himself, it was the filthiest place imaginable. You'd think that would be the end of Valenzuela's suffering, but nope. Fast forward to 2018, he was out of prison after completing his sentence, but then he was handed over to the US authorities who had been waiting for him for 7 long years. It was like jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. What if? Let's take a step back and think about this. What if Valenzuela had taken a different path? What if he had never gone to see his uncle or never listened to his advice? Then there would have been no bus ride, no checkpoint, no arrest. his life would have been completely different. He would have had millions in cash and a whole world to disappear into. To make this what-if situation a reality, all he had to do was avoid the detour to his uncle's. Like, who robs a bank and the first thing they want to do is go see their relatives? Any sane person would go and hide, right? Valenzuela could have aimed for a big city like Mexico City. He could have blended in there. It would have been a piece of cake. The city is a bustling metropolis, perfect for someone looking to vanish into the crowd. With his pockets filled with cash, Valenzuela could have easily procured fake IDs. We're talking top-notch forgeries here, the kind that could pass any scrutiny. A new identity, maybe even a couple of them, and he would have been a ghost, totally untraceable. Now, let's talk about the money. With $4.3 million, Valenzuela had options, lots of them. It's not just about stashing the cash under a mattress. Now that we have cryptocurrency, he could have laundered it, converting those stacks of bills into digital gold. Bitcoin, Ethereum, you name it. He could have turned that cash into a digital fortune, far from the prying eyes of the law. Imagine Valenzuela in this alternate reality, living a life of luxury. But that's not all. With that kind of money, Valenzuela could have done anything. Traveling the world, living in luxury penthouses, driving exotic cars, or maybe even settling down under a new identity, starting a new life, a new story. This alternate reality for Valenzuela shows how much a tiny mistake can do to your life. One decision, one moment of trusting the wrong advice, and it all came crashing down. If he had just stayed off that bus, chosen a different route, his world would have been wildly different. Charged back home. Now, let's step back to reality because that's what it is. After spending 7 years in a Mexican prison, he finally came out. But after pulling off a multi-million-dollar heist, it was evident that he still had the US hot on his heels. They were waiting impatiently back in the country to hold him accountable. As soon as Valenzuela stepped out of a Mexican jail in September 2018, the Mexican authorities didn't waste any time. They handed him right over to the US. So, what did Valenzuela do next? Did he try to clear his part? Well, yes, he tried. Valenzuela wrote this heartfelt letter to the judge, pleading for a bit of leniency. He claimed the whole reason behind the heist was to raise money for his dad's medical bills. Whether that was true or not, who knows? But it does tug at the heartstrings, especially since his dad passed away before he got out. Valenzuela also wrote something pretty deep in the letter. He says, quote, "The moment I was caught, I felt a great weight lifted off my shoulders. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew it was all for the best." Unquote. Kinda makes you wonder, was he relieved to be caught? Did he feel guilty? Either way, the US was not in a forgiving mood. Fast forward to April 29, 2019, and Valenzuela was standing before a judge in the US, getting his sentence. The judge laid it down. 10 years in prison. And the worst part of it was that the time he'd already served in Mexico did not count. That means Valenzuela will be serving his time in the US prison until 2029. The missing cash. Remember how Valenzuela stole 4.3 mil, but the Mexican police only found 3.8 mil? That leaves 500 grand unaccounted for. Where did it vanish to? Well, Valenzuela claimed he used that money to pay for his dad's medical bills. It sounds like a legitimate reason, right? But there's more to it than meets the eye. First of all, Valenzuela did not just claim it for the missing 500 grand. He said he pulled the heist in the first place to pay his dad's medical bills. If helping his dad was a big motivator, prosecutors weren't buying the whole story. They pointed out a pretty obvious fact. $4.3 million is a lot more than what you would need for medical bills. This large sum added some weight to their theory that Valenzuela also did this for revenge. Maybe it wasn't just about the money. Maybe it was also about sticking it to the bank. Valenzuela kept repeating his story though, and then when the prosecutors asked him about the missing amount, he insisted that he had started to pay the bills already and had given the missing 500 grand to his dad for medical expenses. But here comes the twist. According to his family members, they never even got that cash. Why? Because it was supposedly stolen right out of their car. Talk about bad luck if that's what really happened. The prosecution, however, was not swallowing this story either. They had a different theory. They believed Valenzuela stashed that $500,000 somewhere in Washington before driving down to Mexico. They believed that he wanted a safety net, a hidden stash he could fall back on if he ever got caught. So now we're left with two possibilities. Either that 500 grand was really swiped from Valenzuela's family car, or it's still out there, hidden somewhere in Washington. If it's the latter, what happens next? Let's say it's 2029, and Valenzuela gets out of prison. Would he try to retrieve the hidden cash? And if he does, what then? Could he try to launder it through crypto or some other legitimate business, keep it hidden, or maybe even try to start a new life with it? If the money was indeed stolen, that's one wild stroke of misfortune. But if it's really hidden and Valenzuela knows where, that would be another chance at life for him. Well, what do you think? What theory is true here? Was the money stolen, or is it still out there waiting for Valenzuela to come back for it? Let us know in the comments below. If you were on the edge of your seat with Valenzuela's heist story, just wait until you see what we've got lined up next. Our upcoming video is about the most mind-blowing crimes in US history. Check out these wild, unbelievable stories.